A Lakota warrior came begging for milk. She nursed the baby and became the mother he needed. The winter had come early that year, covering the plains in cold silence. Snow stretched across the land like a white blanket, hiding the paths that once guided travelers from one place to another. The wind moved slowly but sharply, cutting through clothes and skin, reminding everyone that survival was never easy on the frontier. Smoke rose from a few scattered cabins near the edge of a small settlement, each one holding people who stayed close to their fires, protecting what little warmth they had. A Lakota warrior walked toward that settlement with slow, careful steps. His shoulders were strong, and his posture showed years of discipline and training. But exhaustion followed him like a shadow. Wrapped against his chest, protected by layers of cloth and fur, was a small baby. The child made soft sounds, weak and restless, as if searching for something that could not be found in the cold air. The warrior's name was known among his people, but here he was only a stranger. His face showed determination, yet behind his eyes was something deeper. Fear he refused to speak aloud. He had traveled for days without proper rest. Each step felt heavier than the last, yet he continued forward because stopping was not an option. The child's survival depended on movement, on reaching someone who could help. He paused at the edge of the settlement, looking at the cabins from a distance. Smoke curled into the sky, promising warmth inside, but entering meant crossing an invisible line. Pride had always been important to him. He had been taught that a warrior must stand strong, must protect others, must never show weakness. Yet now he carried a baby who needed something he could not provide. He adjusted the cloth around the infant and gently touched the small face. The baby's skin felt too cool, too fragile. He remembered the moment the child was born, the sound of the first cry echoing through the tent. He also remembered the silence that followed when the child's mother stopped breathing. That silence had never truly left him. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward the first cabin. The wooden door looked simple but strong. Snow had gathered around the steps, and he brushed it away with his boot before knocking lightly. For a moment, nothing happened. He could hear faint movement inside, the sound of someone shifting, perhaps watching through a small window. The door opened only slightly. A man stood there, eyes cautious. The warrior spoke quietly, his voice calm but heavy. "I need milk for the child," he said. The man looked at the baby, then back at the warrior. Uncertainty crossed his face. He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "We don't have anything to spare," the man replied, his voice not unkind but distant. Winter is hard for everyone. The door closed gently but firmly. The warrior remained standing there for a moment, staring at the wood as if expecting it to open again. The wind brushed against him, and he pulled his cloak tighter around the child. He turned away without anger. He understood fear. He understood scarcity. He walked to another house. This time a woman opened the door. She listened quietly as he explained again, his words simple and respectful. She looked at the baby longer than the first man had, her eyes softening slightly. For a moment hope rose inside him, but then she shook her head slowly.
"I am sorry," she said. "I cannot help."
Each refusal felt heavier than the last. The warrior continued moving through the settlement, asking without raising his voice, without showing frustration. Some people avoided eye contact. Others offered brief apologies. A few closed their doors before he finished speaking. The cold grew stronger as the day moved forward, and the baby's small movements became slower. He sat briefly on a wooden bench near a well, cradling the child carefully. He checked the baby's breathing, listening closely. The faint sound was still there, but weak. He felt something tight inside his chest, not anger, not even despair, but a deep pressure that came from responsibility. He had faced enemies without fear. He had stood in storms, crossed rivers, and hunted in harsh seasons. Yet this felt different. This was not a battle he understood. People passed by at a distance, some whispering quietly. A few children watched him with curious eyes before being pulled away by their parents. He did not blame them. A stranger carrying a fragile child in the middle of winter was not something they expected.
After resting only a short while, he stood again.
He refused to give up. Somewhere in this place, someone would understand. He walked toward the edge of the settlement where fewer houses stood. The buildings looked older, more worn by time and weather. Smoke rose from one small cabin that stood slightly apart from the others. Something about its quiet presence drew his attention. He approached slowly. The cabin was simple, built from rough wood, with a small window covered by cloth. The door showed signs of repair, as if someone had worked carefully to keep it standing despite years of storms. He raised his hand to knock, but paused for a moment. The baby shifted slightly, making a soft sound. He lowered his head, closing his eyes briefly as if gathering strength. Then he knocked. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened wider than the others had. A woman stood there wrapped in a thick shawl. Her face looked calm but tired, as though she carried memories that never fully left her. She did not speak immediately. Her eyes moved from the warrior's face to the small bundle in his arms. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding.
I need help,
he said quietly. The words felt heavier than anything he had said that day. He was not asking as a warrior or as a leader. He was asking as a father. The woman stepped aside slightly, allowing him to enter. Warm air touched his skin, making him suddenly aware of how cold he had become. Inside, the cabin was modest but clean. A fire burned gently in the corner, filling the space with soft light. He stood near the door, unsure whether to move further. The woman closed the door behind him and turned back. He hesitated for only a moment before carefully revealing the baby's face. The woman leaned closer, her expression changing as she noticed how small and weak the infant looked. Something deep and emotional passed across her eyes, but she quickly controlled it. "You came far," she said quietly. He nodded. "My wife." He paused, searching for words. "She is gone. The child needs milk." The room fell silent again. The fire crackled softly, and outside the wind brushed against the walls. The woman stood still, her hands resting lightly at her sides. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The warrior felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He had already faced so many refusals. He prepared himself for another. But the woman did not send him away. Instead, she looked at the baby again, then at him. "Sit," she said gently. He obeyed without question, lowering himself carefully onto a chair near the fire. Warmth began to return to his hands, but he barely noticed. All his attention remained on the child. The woman moved slowly around the room, gathering a few things, her movements calm and thoughtful. The warrior watched silently, unsure what she had decided, but sensing that this moment was different from the others. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the tracks he had made through the settlement. Inside, something quiet and important was beginning. A meeting between two people brought together not by plans or expectations, but by a fragile life that needed them both. The woman moved slowly around the small cabin, her steps quiet and careful, as if she did not want to disturb the fragile moment that had formed between them. The fire burned softly, filling the space with warmth that felt almost unreal after the long journey through the cold. The warrior sat still, holding the baby close, unsure what would happen next, but sensing that something important had changed. She returned to him and knelt slightly so she could see the child more clearly. Her eyes softened as she watched the small movements of the baby's hands and the weak rise and fall of the tiny chest. There was sadness in her expression, but also strength, the kind that came from surviving loss.
"How long has it been?"
she asked gently. 3 days, he replied. His voice remained calm, but exhaustion showed through. She nodded slowly, understanding more than he had said aloud. Without hesitation, she carefully reached for the baby. The warrior paused for only a moment before allowing her to take the child. Trust did not come easily to him, but desperation and instinct guided his decision. She held the baby with natural care, adjusting the cloth to make the child comfortable. The infant made a faint sound, almost like a sigh, as if recognizing warmth and safety. The woman sat near the fire and began to prepare to nurse the baby. The warrior turned his eyes away slightly, respecting her privacy. Silence filled the room, broken only by the gentle sounds of the fire and the soft breathing of the child. After a few moments, the baby began to drink. The change was immediate and powerful. The weak restlessness faded, replaced by calm focus. The warrior felt something heavy lift from his chest. For the first time since his wife's passing, he saw the child receive the nourishment he had been unable to provide. He did not speak. Words felt too small for the relief he felt. The woman watched the baby carefully, making sure everything was steady. Her face softened more with each passing moment. Something inside her seemed to awaken, a memory of comfort and care she had once known deeply. Time passed quietly. Outside, the wind continued to move across the land, but inside the cabin, the world felt slower, safer. When the baby finished, she gently adjusted the cloth and held the child close for a while longer. The infant's breathing became stronger, more even. She handed the baby back to the warrior with a small nod. "He will grow stronger," she said softly. The warrior bowed his head slightly in gratitude. "You have saved him," he said. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she stood and walked toward a small table, pouring warm water into a cup and offering it to him. He accepted it with both hands, feeling the heat spread through his fingers. "You can stay here tonight," she said quietly. "The cold is too strong for travel." Accepting help felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, but he knew she was right. The baby needed warmth and rest. "Thank you," he said. She nodded and began preparing a simple meal. The smell of food filled the room, reminding him how long it had been since he had eaten properly. She placed a bowl in front of him without ceremony. He ate slowly at first, then with more energy as strength returned to his body. They spoke little, yet the silence felt peaceful rather than awkward. Each understood that words were not always necessary. As evening approached, shadows moved across the walls. The firelight created soft patterns that made the small space feel alive. The baby slept deeply now, wrapped safely and placed near the warmth. The woman sat across from him, watching the flames. After a long while, she spoke. "I had a child," she said quietly. The warrior looked up, listening carefully. "She did not live long," the woman continued. "Winter took her. Since then, this cabin has felt very empty." Her voice remained calm, but emotion lingered beneath her words. The warrior did not interrupt. He understood loss too well to offer empty comfort. "I thought I would never hold a child again," she added, glancing toward the sleeping baby. The warrior nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. They shared a silence that felt heavy, yet meaningful. It was not the silence of strangers, but of two people who carried similar pain. Later that night, the baby woke again, crying softly. The warrior moved quickly, lifting the child, but the woman gently reached out. "Let me," she said. She nursed the baby again, her movements steady and natural. The child calmed quickly, falling asleep once more. Watching her, the warrior felt both gratitude and humility. He had always believed strength meant standing alone, yet here he was, relying completely on someone else. Days passed in a quiet rhythm. Each morning began with the woman checking on the baby, nursing him, and ensuring he remained warm. The warrior helped with small tasks around the cabin, gathering wood, repairing loose boards, clearing snow from the entrance. Working with his hands gave him purpose, and slowly he began to feel less like a burden. The settlement noticed his presence. Some people watched from a distance, whispering quietly. Rumors began to spread about the warrior and the woman living together, though nothing improper existed between them. Still, he felt their eyes, their curiosity. One afternoon, a man from the settlement approached the cabin, asking questions. The woman answered calmly, protecting both the warrior and the child with quiet firmness. After the visitor left, the warrior looked at her with surprise. "You defend us," he said. She smiled slightly. "I defend what is right," Trust between them deepened without needing grand gestures. They began sharing small stories, memories of their past, lessons learned from hardship, moments of quiet humor that brought brief smiles. The baby grew stronger day by day. His cries became louder, his movements more active. The warrior often watched the child with wonder, as if seeing life return piece by piece. One evening, as the sky turned dark blue, the warrior stepped outside briefly. Snow crunched beneath his feet as he looked toward the distant horizon. For the first time since his journey began, he felt something close to peace. When he returned inside, he saw the woman rocking the baby gently. The soft light from the fire illuminated both of them, creating a scene that felt warm and safe. He realized then that this cabin had become more than a place of survival. It had become a place of healing. He sat quietly nearby, listening to the soft sounds of the baby's breathing and the crackling fire. The world outside remained harsh and uncertain, but within those walls something new had begun. A connection built not on expectation or duty, but on kindness and shared understanding. Morning light slowly filled the small cabin, turning the shadows into soft shapes along the wooden walls. The fire had burned low during the night, leaving only warm embers that glowed quietly. Outside, the snow reflected the pale sky, making the world look calm, even though the cold still held its grip on the land. The baby stirred first, making small sounds that broke the silence. The woman woke quickly as if her body had already learned to listen for those tiny signals. She moved gently so she would not startle the child. The warrior who had been sleeping lightly near the fire opened his eyes at once. They exchanged a brief glance. Not awkward anymore, but familiar. Without words, they understood the rhythm of the morning. She lifted the baby and prepared to nurse him, while the warrior added wood to the fire, building the flames slowly until warmth returned to the room. Each day followed a similar pattern now. The baby grew stronger, feeding regularly and sleeping longer between cries. His small hands moved more, grasping at the air or curling around fingers offered to him. These small signs of life brought quiet happiness into the cabin. The woman found herself smiling more often. The sadness she carried had not disappeared, but it felt lighter when she held the child. She spoke softly to him sometimes, using gentle tones that filled the room with warmth. The warrior listened to her voice, noticing how calm it made the baby. After breakfast, he stepped outside to gather more firewood. The cold air touched his face, sharp and clear. He noticed tracks in the snow, signs that people from the settlement had passed nearby. Some stopped at a distance to glance toward the cabin before continuing on their way. He knew they were watching, wondering about the arrangement between him and the woman. He did not blame them. It was unusual, perhaps even confusing to those who did not understand their situation. When he returned inside, she was sitting near the window, holding the baby while sunlight rested gently across them. For a moment he stood still, observing the peaceful scene. It felt different from the heavy loneliness he had known since losing his wife. "You should rest more," she said, noticing his tired expression. "I will rest when he rests," he replied simply. She smiled slightly at that. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the cabin felt more like a shared space than a temporary refuge. The warrior repaired small parts of the structure that had worn down over time, tightening loose boards, sealing small gaps where cold air slipped through. The woman watched him work with quiet appreciation. "You do not need to fix everything," she told him once. "It gives me purpose," he said. She understood that. Caring for the baby had given her purpose again, too. One afternoon they sat together while the baby slept between them, wrapped carefully in soft cloth. The fire burned gently, and outside the sky remained gray with winter clouds. "Your people will search for you," she said quietly. He nodded. "Yes. Will you return?" He hesitated before answering. "I must, but not yet. But albeit for their questions." Yet the thought lingered between them, the knowledge that their time together might not last forever. Later that day, someone knocked on the door. The warrior stood immediately, protective instincts rising. The woman motioned for him to stay calm as she opened the door slightly. A woman from the settlement stood outside, holding a small basket. She looked uncertain but kind. "I heard about the child," the visitor said softly. I brought some herbs and cloth. The woman accepted the gift with gratitude. The visitor glanced at the warrior briefly, her eyes curious, but not unkind. After a short exchange, she left. The warrior looked surprised. They begin to trust, he said. People often need time, the woman replied. As the days passed, more small gestures followed. Someone leaving extra wood near the cabin, another person offering dried food. The whispers continued, but kindness slowly replaced suspicion. Inside the cabin, the bond between the warrior and the woman deepened in quiet ways. They shared stories in the evenings. He spoke about the wide plains, about traditions passed down through generations, about lessons learned from elders. She spoke about her childhood, about her dreams before loss had changed her life. Sometimes they laughed softly at simple memories. Other times they sat in silence, understanding that presence alone could bring comfort. The baby became the center of everything. His eyes grew brighter, his cries stronger. One evening he made a small sound that almost resembled laughter. Both adults looked at each other with surprise and joy. He is strong, the warrior said, pride warming his voice. He is loved, she answered gently. That night, as snow fell again outside, the warrior found himself watching her more closely. He noticed the way she moved with patience, the care she showed in every small action. He realized she had become more than a helper. She had become part of the child's life in a way that could not easily be undone. Yet with that realization came uncertainty. What would happen when he returned to his people? Would she remain here alone again? Would the child forget her warmth? He pushed the thoughts away for the moment, focusing instead on the present. One morning, the baby became restless, crying louder than usual. Both adults reacted quickly, checking for signs of discomfort. The woman soothed him gently, singing a soft melody under her breath. Slowly, the child calmed, falling asleep again. The warrior watched her closely. You understand him better than I do, he admitted. She shook her head. You understand him too. You just show it differently. Her words stayed with him long after. As winter slowly began to loosen its hold, the days grew slightly longer. Sunlight lasted longer into the evening, bringing a sense of change. The warrior felt a quiet tension building, the feeling that decisions would soon need to be made. One afternoon he stood outside holding the baby, showing him the bright sky. The child moved his small hands, as if reaching toward the light. The warrior smiled softly, something rare but genuine. The woman watched from the doorway, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that caring for the baby had changed her more than she expected. The emptiness she once felt had slowly filled with purpose, connection, and hope. Inside the cabin later that evening, they sat together near the fire once more. Neither spoke for a while. The baby slept peacefully between them, breathing softly. Finally, the woman spoke. Sometimes healing comes when we do not expect it, she said quietly. He looked at her, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. Yes, he replied. Outside, the world remained uncertain, but inside the cabin a new sense of belonging had formed, fragile yet strong, built through shared care and quiet understanding. Neither of them knew what the future would bring, but they both felt that whatever happened next would be shaped by the bond they had created together. And as the firelight danced across the walls, the warrior realized that strength was not only found in battles or journeys. Sometimes it was found in stillness, in trust, and in allowing another person to share the weight of life. The snow began to melt slowly as the days grew longer. Small patches of earth appeared where the white covering had once been thick and endless. The air still carried a chill, but there was a quiet promise of change. Birds returned, their soft calls breaking the silence of winter. The settlement seemed more alive, people stepping outside more often, repairing fences and preparing for the coming season. Inside the cabin, life followed a gentle rhythm. The baby had grown stronger, his eyes bright and curious as he watched everything around him. His small hands reached toward the firelight, toward the woman's shawl, toward the warrior's fingers when he leaned close.
Each day brought new moments that filled the small space with warmth.
The warrior spent more time outside now, gathering wood, checking the path, and observing the horizon. Something inside him felt restless. He did not speak about it immediately, but the woman noticed the change. His movements carried a quiet tension, as if he were listening for something only he could hear. One afternoon, while she held the baby near the window, she saw him standing at a distance, looking toward the open plains. His posture was still strong, but there was uncertainty in the way he stood, as though waiting for an answer. When he returned inside, she asked gently, "What troubles you?" He hesitated before answering. "Spring comes," he said simply. She nodded, understanding more than he had said. Spring meant movement, decisions, and returning to responsibilities that had been paused during winter. That evening they sat together near the fire while the baby slept. The flames moved slowly, casting warm shadows across the walls. "My people will search when the weather clears," he said quietly. "They will expect me to return." The words hung in the air. The woman looked down at the child, her heart tightening at the thought. She had known this moment would come, yet hearing it spoken aloud made it real. "You must do what is right for you and for him," she said softly. He watched her closely, noticing the calm strength in her voice despite the sadness she tried to hide. Days passed and the feeling of change grew stronger. One morning, distant figures appeared along the horizon, riders moving slowly toward the settlement. The warrior saw them first. He stood still, watching carefully, recognizing the way they moved, the rhythm of their travel. "They are mine," he said quietly when he returned inside. The woman felt her breath catch, though she had expected this moment. She nodded slowly. The riders arrived later that day. They spoke with him outside the cabin, their voices low and respectful. From inside, the woman could not hear their words, but she could see their serious expressions. She held the baby close, feeling both pride and fear. After a long conversation, the warrior returned inside. His face was calm but heavy with thought. "They came to bring me back," he said. She listened quietly, waiting for him to continue. "They know about the child. They wish to see him raised among our people." The words felt both natural and painful. She knew the child belonged to his father's world, yet her heart resisted the idea of separation. "What will you do?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he sat beside her, looking at the sleeping baby.
"I do not know," he admitted. The following days were filled with quiet tension.
The riders remained nearby, respectful of the space but waiting for his decision. Members of the settlement also began to notice the change, offering curious glances as they passed. Inside the cabin, moments became more precious. The woman held the baby longer, memorizing the small details, the way he stretched when waking, the soft sounds he made before falling asleep. The warrior watched her carefully, recognizing the depth of her connection to the child. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they spoke openly for the first time about what the child meant to each of them. "You saved him," the warrior said. "Without you, he would not be here." She shook her head gently. "We both saved him. You carried him through winter. You never gave up." He considered her words, understanding the truth in them. "But if you leave," she began, then stopped, unsure how to finish the thought. He waited. "If you leave, this place will feel empty again," she said quietly. He felt the weight of her honesty. For the first time, he realized that the choice before him was not only about tradition or duty, but also about the bonds they had formed together. The next morning, he walked alone across the open land, thinking deeply. The wind moved gently across the grass where snow had melted, carrying the scent of new life. He remembered the teachings of his elders, the importance of family, community, and responsibility. He also remembered the long nights when the woman had cared for the baby without hesitation, offering kindness without expecting anything in return. When he returned to the cabin, he found her sitting near the fire, holding the child while humming softly. The sight filled him with clarity. "I have made a decision," he said. She looked at him, her expression calm but uncertain. "I will return with my people," he continued, "but I do not wish to leave you behind." She blinked, surprised. "The child needs you," he said. "You are part of his life now. I cannot pretend otherwise." She felt emotion rise in her chest, a mixture of relief and fear.
"Your people, will they accept that? They will listen," he replied.
"And I will speak for you." Days later, the riders gathered again outside the cabin. The warrior spoke with them firmly, explaining his choice. Some listened with curiosity, others with hesitation, but none showed disrespect. Inside, the woman prepared quietly, unsure what the future held but feeling that a new path had opened before her. That evening, as the sky turned soft with sunset colors, they sat together one last time in the cabin as it had always been, simple, warm, and filled with memories. The baby slept peacefully between them. Change was coming, but it no longer felt like loss alone. Instead, it felt like a bridge between two worlds, built through trust and compassion. And as the firelight flickered gently, both of them understood that the journey ahead would require courage, not the courage of battle, but the courage of choosing connection over fear. Morning came slowly, as if the land itself wanted to hold on to the quiet moment before everything changed. Soft light entered the cabin through the small window, touching the wooden floor and warming the space little by little. Outside, the air felt different now. Winter had almost fully passed, leaving behind damp earth and new life pushing through the soil. The woman woke early, though she had barely slept. She watched the baby resting beside her, his small chest rising and falling steadily. His strength had returned fully. The weak cries from those first days were gone, replaced by soft sounds and curious movements. She gently brushed a hand over his hair, feeling both pride and a deep ache in her heart. Across the room, the warrior was already awake. He sat quietly, preparing his things with careful movements. His face looked calm, but she could sense the weight of the moment pressing on him. Neither spoke at first. Words felt too heavy, too final. After some time, she stood and began preparing a simple morning meal. The familiar routine gave her comfort. The warrior helped without being asked, moving through the cabin with ease now, as if it had become part of him. Outside, the riders waited at a distance, giving them space. Their presence reminded both of them that the time for decision had arrived. After eating, the warrior walked toward the baby and gently lifted him. The child opened his eyes and looked up at him, calm and trusting. The warrior's expression softened. "He is strong," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "He fought to live." They stood close together, sharing the moment. Soon after, the warrior stepped outside to speak with the riders again. The woman watched from the doorway, holding the baby's blanket tightly in her hands. She felt nervous, but also hopeful. The future remained uncertain, yet she knew that whatever happened would shape all of their lives. The conversation outside lasted a long time. The riders listened carefully as the warrior spoke. Some nodded slowly, others exchanged thoughtful glances. Finally, they turned toward the cabin and waited. The warrior returned, his face showing a calm determination. "They will accept you," he said softly. The woman blinked in surprise. "They agree? They trust my judgment," he answered. "And they see what you have done for the child." She felt a wave of emotion rise within her, relief mixed with disbelief. She had expected resistance, perhaps even rejection, but instead she was being invited into something larger than herself. "What happens now?" she asked. "We travel together," he said. "You will meet them as family." The word family stayed in the air between them. It felt powerful and new. She spent the next hours preparing carefully. She packed only what she truly needed, a few personal belongings, warm clothes, and small items that carried memories of her past. Each object felt like a piece of her old life being gently folded into a new beginning. Before leaving, she walked slowly around the cabin one last time. Her fingers traced the rough wooden walls, remembering the quiet nights, the shared laughter, the moments of healing that had taken place there. The cabin had once been a place of loneliness, but now it held memories of connection and purpose. Outside, the warrior secured their belongings and prepared the path ahead. The riders greeted her respectfully, their expressions calm and welcoming. Though she felt nervous, she also sensed kindness in their eyes. The journey began slowly. The land stretched wide before them, green patches breaking through where snow had melted. The baby rested peacefully in her arms, watching the world with wide, curious eyes. As they traveled, the warrior stayed close, guiding her gently and ensuring she felt safe. They spoke quietly along the way, sharing thoughts about the future. He explained traditions, customs, and the importance of community within his people. She listened carefully, wanting to understand and respect the world she was entering. The first night of travel, they stopped near a river. The sound of flowing water filled the air, calming and steady. The riders built a fire, and everyone gathered around. The woman felt shy at first, unsure how to fit into the group, but small gestures of kindness helped her relax. One woman offered her warm tea. Another smiled at the baby, speaking softly to him. Slowly, she felt acceptance growing. Later that evening, the warrior sat beside her watching the firelight. "You are not alone anymore," he said gently. She looked at him, feeling gratitude and something deeper, a quiet trust that had grown through shared hardship. Days passed, and the journey continued. The land changed as they moved, revealing new landscapes and signs of life. The baby grew more active, laughing softly and reaching for everything around him. Each time he smiled, both adults felt joy that erased their fears for a moment. When they finally reached the warrior's home, people gathered to greet them. Elders stood with calm dignity, observing quietly. The warrior introduced her respectfully, speaking of her courage and kindness. He told the story of how she had saved the child's life. The elders listened carefully. One stepped forward and looked at her with gentle eyes. "You have given life," the elder said. "You are welcome here." Relief washed over her. The fear she had carried slowly faded. In the following days, she learned the rhythm of the community. People helped her adjust, teaching her customs and sharing stories. She felt nervous at times, but never unwelcome. The baby became a symbol of connection, bringing smiles wherever he went. The warrior watched her closely, feeling gratitude for the way she embraced this new life with courage. He saw how naturally she cared for the child, how she listened and learned without losing her own identity. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, they stood together watching the sky change colors. The baby slept peacefully in her arms. "You have become more than a helper," he said quietly. "You are his mother." She felt tears rise but smiled gently. "And you are his strength," she replied. They stood in silence, feeling the weight and beauty of what they had created together. Not just survival, but a family built through choice, compassion, and trust. The story closed with a simple scene. The child played near them, strong and full of life. The warrior no longer carried his burden alone. The woman no longer lived in loneliness. Together, they had found healing in unexpected places.